here on Eastern Standard Time. Welcome everyone to the UDL-IRN Cast-Free webinar series. We're thrilled to have you all here. I'm Allison Posey from CAST. I'm actually not in the CAST office right now. You can see it's dark out in my house. And I'm very excited to have our group here from the IRN. Before I introduce them, I just have a couple of logistics to get through. And just to introduce just an overview, I just want to summarize, the IRN is a global community that works, and I love this phrase that they use, to change the game of teaching and learning. So if you're listening and either live with us tonight, or if you're listening to the recording later, welcome. And we're thrilled that you're here to really think about how can we change the game of teaching and learning. So using the Universal Design for Learning, the UDL framework, IRN researchers inspire practice, they share resources, and they gather evidence on the impact of learning. This is really powerful for education. So we're very excited to chat with you all tonight. We're going to talk about what is the IRN, and if you've noticed, I have not yet said what it stands for, so that's coming. And we're going to talk with them a little bit about the UDL credentialing opportunities that are in the works. We're going to share some resources and engage in some conversation. We really hope that I already see a first question coming in, that you all please feel free to contribute to the chat box. Make sure that you're putting it out to everyone so that we can all see those comments. Although if you do want it just to come to the panelists, you can select who you would like to direct the question to. And we will pause at a couple points to take questions if we're in the flow of the conversation, but we'll also try to pay attention to the chat box so that if it is something that we want to address right away, that it feels in context. So do I have a thumbs up? Is everyone good to keep going? We're getting some thumbs up.
Let's go.
All right, all right. So first, our first quick poll, what does the IRN stand for? And I've given you three options: the Innovation and Reasoning Network, the Implementation and Research Network, Interdisciplinary Responsiveness Network, or if none of these are right, we would love to hear your idea of what the IRN stands for, and you can be as creative as you want. My ends, I was not, network is that's a great word, and I had a hard time coming up with other N words. What do you all think? A, B, C, or feel free to type in your own D. This is great, a little variability. Yes, so for those of you who said B, you are correct, the Implementation and Research Network. So I know I haven't introduced you all yet, but is there any backstory behind how you came up with the IRN as the title of the organization?
You know, this I have to go back and give credit to two individuals that really were kind of the start of the organization. And my name is Brian, by the way. And
I'm doing this backwards. I'll introduce you in a moment.
But there are two individuals that started this. And they really came together around the conversation of what does UDL implementation look like? And by the way, what research do we have on UDL? And that's kind of where the conversation started. And they said, you know what, if we're going to put together an organization, why don't we focus it around those two concepts and make them core to the organization? And that's where the UDL-IR part of the IRN came from.
Thank you. So that's really helpful. So very much function, and just where there was a need, that's where the function came in, and you stepped right up and took that. That's fantastic. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. All right, second question is, how have you engaged with the IRN already? So some of you, this might be your first introduction to the IRN. Some of you may have been to their annual spring conference. I think you're up to number 4 this year. Is this the 4th one? Some of you may have already collaborated and designed with them or researched with them. And some of you may be everywhere the IRN is. That's on social media, at conferences, in research and publications. So and if there's something else that I haven't put on there, please let us know how you've interacted so far with the IRN. Oh, great, like using their great resources on their website. UDL-IRN fangirl.
I love it.
Right.
Actually, and Brian came up with a fun way of combining cast and the IRN is like a cast iron pan, which is kind of a fun image to have. Oh, Kathy was at the initial meeting. How cool is that? Very fun. Oh, great. At Katie Novak's webinar, the Fiddler's UDL training, IRN webinars. This is great. Is there a hashtag for tonight's webinar? You know, Mindy, do you want to jump on that? You can Twitter at UDL-IRN, hashtag IRN. And for cast events, you can do hashtag CastPL and or hashtag UDL-IRN. All right, so our goals for tonight are to finally introduce these strange people who are on the video, who are the IRN, and to share the UDL credentialing ideas related to the Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA bill, the legislation that was signed in 2015 by President Obama. So without any further ado, I really want to thank the panelists for being so patient as I got through just some of this goofy introduction stuff. Brian Dean is here. Brian, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hey, what's up, everybody out in the CAST webinar world? That's all I have. I don't have anything other that's real pithy or you know, real clever right now.
Well, I'll say a little bit more about you then. You are part of the UDL-IRN's executive board. You're a member of CAST Professional Learning Cadre. You work as an educational consultant in Michigan. I know there's a lot of exciting UDL work going on in that state. And this is my favorite description of you. He is happily a positive deviant and an agent of disruption. And you can find him. He's at DRREV Dean. So I know Mindy's going to be right on board to help get that Twitter name out there, so you can follow him. Brian Warchek, did I say that correctly? I'm so sorry. Every time I say I'm going to say it correctly.
Wojciech.
Wojciech.
And then check what we try to work for.
Welcome, Brian. Do you want to say just a quick hello before I give a more official hello?
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here on behalf of the IRN and getting an opportunity to talk about some of the neat things that I think are happening. So.
Excellent, thank you. So Brian is also a member of the UDL-IRN's executive board and works as an assistant professor in teacher education at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. And you can follow him at BWWOJCI. Thank you for being here, Brian. And Sue, do you want to say a quick hello?
I sure do. I too am very excited to be here. My name is Sue Harden, and I'm also on the board with these guys and a few other even crazier guys. So it's always an interesting time at the UDL-IRN. We're really happy to be here tonight and share with you some of the exciting things that we're doing. And most importantly, we're really looking forward to inviting you to join us, because we really mean the N in the network. And so you'll be hearing some call to actions throughout the evening, and we'll hope that you'll pay mind to those and join us. We want folks to be part of our network and to network with you.
Wonderful, thank you. So Sue is also a member of the UDL-IRN's executive board. She's on the board of the ISTE Inclusive Learning Network, PLN, the Professional Learning Network, and she works as an AT and a UDL consultant in Michigan as well. So you can follow her at SHARDIN22, so on Twitter. So lots of folks out there on Twitter. Yep, there they are. Thank you so much, Mindy. So thank you all for coming today and this evening. And I just thought, you know, in these webinars, we often try to get a little bit of the behind the scenes story. So we can certainly go to your website. It is a fantastic website, and we can see what's presented there. But we would love to just get a little bit of the behind the scenes of how did the IRN originate? What are some of your goals and visions? And, you know, if you could just see success, what would that look like for you? And I'll let you all duke out who goes first, and then I'll try to make it fair and even as we go along.
We already elected Brian W. to go first, so.
So I've had the privilege of being involved in the IRN for quite a while. I had mentioned before that this this organization kind of came together as through some ideas, and it was ideas kind of being thrown around. People were getting very excited about the work that CAST was doing in UDL, and there was a lot of discussion, but it was happening in pockets, and there were questions that were happening like, how do we bring this UDL thing and make it come to life? How do we research? How do we show that it actually works? We have strong beliefs about it, but how do we do this? And so the IRN really didn't come together as a formal organization for about 3 years after that point. There were a series of convenings, if you will. They were meetups of groups of individuals, and some happened formally, some happened informally. And people just started talking and saying, you know what, we really should connect on this. And so out of that came the implementation research network, because we're focusing on the discussions of implementation, research, and network. By the way, those first two individuals, one is named Jamie Basham. Jamie serves as our current CEO for the organization, and one is Jeff Dietrich, who is in Sue's and Brian's neck of the woods up in Michigan. And some real creative energy that happened that started this organization and really set the foundation for a lot of the creative energy that has followed.
Thank you, Brian. No, very interesting. Brian or Sue, do either of you want to follow up with any other behind the scenes? It is interesting that it took that long. I think that's a really interesting, the idea that the belief was kind of there and you felt it, but then the actual, it can take time. Implementation takes time regardless of what you're talking about. So I appreciate that. Brian or Sue, other thoughts?
Brian, you want to share?
So I'm relatively new to the IRN, and so I'm learning the history myself, which is always interesting when I get to kind of sit at everybody's feet and kind of listen. So I don't know that I have anything to add to the idea of how did it originate, but I do. I really resonate with the mission of the UDL-IRN and the idea of not just integrating universal design for learning, but the concept of what does that mean through iterative design, and what does that mean if we start reframing kind of our vision of as practitioners into designers. What does that open us up for, and how can we then reimagine? Because I am that positive deviant and that agent of disruption that really speaks to me, and it's a mission that I see every time that we meet and every time that the IRN puts something together. So when they asked me to join the board, at first I thought I was kind of being punked, but and then when they said, no, it's legit, it's real, I was super excited and stoked for that very reason.
Well, and I think UDL really is often perceived as something that is positive because we all have brains and we all have these brain networks and they work in different ways, but that can really resonate with folks, and that is not always the way learning is approached. And so the fact that you're a positive deviant, I think that aligns really nicely with the overall UDL message as well.
Right.
Yeah, one of the questions you asked is about what our goals and visions are, our mission. And really what we've set out to do is to find and share models of best practice, both for research and for implementation. And so that's really kind of at the heart of what we do, trying to search it out because we know that UDL is being implemented throughout the world. And we're trying to be a very international network and reaching out to not just those in the US, but other countries. So we're excited to see folks here from Chile and Ireland and Canada. And maybe I missed a few, but that's really what our mission is to find these best practice models, whether it's implementation or research, and make sure we're sharing it in a way that everyone can benefit from the work that's happening around the world.
And I'll underscore, we talk about implementation and research, but I really think the backbone of this organization is the N. It's the network. Our goal is to bring people together, to have these discussions, to share, to collaboratively develop, and really create what UDL is looking like with regard to implementation and research. That networking piece is so huge, and we continue to constantly come back to that as a board, as an organization, about how do we create the mechanisms to bring people together to talk about UDL.
There's a really interesting question, and it's one that I was starting to think, you know, do we bring this up now, or do we start to talk about it in a few minutes? And I think it's something that we'll actually talk about throughout it, and that is, how do you know it when you see it, right? It's not like you all are out there. I did have an image of you, you know, like the mission and dun, 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 going out and looking for the, you know, where is it, where is it? But it's really, it's much more as you're describing. You're talking about these networks, and you're having these conversations and these models that you're talking about, so that bringing those together. So how do you know it? What are you kind of looking for in those conversations or with those districts that gets you pumped up?
Well, you know, one of the things that I think we've been talking a lot about lately is that, you know, it is difficult to say this one moment in time is UDL. I'm walking in a classroom and I'm witnessing 2 to 3 minutes maybe of an instructional moment, and to say this is or isn't UDL is nearly impossible, because there's so much that happens before and after, and there's setup, and so we've discovered through some of our class visits school visits that we've done, that the best way to know UDL when you see it is to talk to teachers. It's really about the conversation that happens when they're thinking about their instruction, when they're thinking about their classroom, when they're designing it. That's where you see UDL. And we're looking for teachers who are doing that, or are thinking about the range of learners that potentially could come to their classrooms, and designing without barriers.
So that, I mean, I think that almost in a nutshell seemed to summarize that goal and vision then, that it's really this network of proactive designing teachers removing barriers for all learners. Does that sound like that in a way encompasses that goal and vision? If you were to, you know, be able to see a world without barriers, is that the broad, do you think kind of the broad vision that you have?
Absolutely.
I think that it's only part of that vision. Right? Because just looking for the place where we're starting to knock down barriers, I think, and really kind of removing them, that's a fantastic place to be in, don't get me wrong. And it's a huge goal to have. But I think Sue hits upon something really strongly when we were kind of talking about and saying, well, what's happening beforehand? What's happening in the intentional design, right? Because it starts getting at that bigger question, and not to be meta with it, but that bigger question of, well, if UDL is just about everything that's out there, then how can you really define it? And then if you can't define it, then what have we all been doing? You know, so I think that's the other side that the IRN is really looking at, is in saying, well, how are we looking at intentional planning, and how are we designing within volatile environments of constant change? And how are we using improvement science and not just large-scale implementation science?
So that again, so that's pulling then on the research component, and that's really where that research piece of the networking can come in and tie into the implementation piece there. So it's really almost the trifecta there, going into creating those environments proactively, networking those decisions, thinking about them, designing them, and then actually putting them into practice.
And I think just to add on to what Brian and Sue have already said, I think the other part of the how do you know when you see it, looking at the teachers, looking at the design, looking at the materials, those are important pieces, and they are pieces of the overall system. But actually looking at the impact on the students themselves, and where the students are in their own identification of, who am I as a learner? What do I need in order to approach this particular learning task to be successful? Those pieces are very important as part of that puzzle as well, that expert learner piece.
So if I could transition this a little bit, because I think we're getting into some of the tough problems you're currently thinking about and working to impact. When you describe expert learners, Brian, what are you what are you envisioning there as those expert learners, and how do you see it? How do you talk about it? How do you research that? And that's out, for all of you, but I'm just going to pick on you, Brian, because you just were talking.
It's a loaded question, which is why I'm going to come back to that network. We need more than one brain kind of looking at this. And when we look at learners, there are so many different facets of what makes an expert learner. We can look at how well do they approach a particular learning experience. How well do they think through the options that are available to them in order to get engaged in that learning experience, and then how well do they reflect on how they learned. That could be one component, but there's so many different facets, whether we look at engagement, whether we look at self-awareness, whether we look at efficacy. Those are all different pieces of the puzzle, and that's why this is when we start looking at what is measuring this, it's bigger than any one individual can do, and that's why the network piece is so very important when we're talking about research and implementation.
Fabulous. Brian or Sue, do you want to add on to that?
I mean, how can you?
I know that was really well said.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks for putting that bar back up there. But I think that's it. And there was a participant, Kathy, and she said, one of the hard parts is defining who all is. And I said in the chat that's to me, that's another beautiful part of what we're looking at. And it's one of the tough problems that we look at too, is not only all the different facets that Brian was talking about, but UDL lets us redefine variability in this huge way. And what does it mean? And how many components, all of the different facets that traditional, pretty strong and strict frameworks don't allow us to do. So I think to me, that's one of the huge pieces that we struggle with, but also it's a good struggle to have both of our organizations in the cast iron grouping,
Yeah, it is almost like you think you're getting this lesson and you're really addressing that variability, and then pow, there's more. There's always more.
Right.
Absolutely.
So one of the tough problems that actually came up today, I mean, we've been talking about it for a while now, but I was reminded of it again today. I talked to a colleague who are implementing UDL quite with a lot of fidelity in their district, and they're having some issues with parents, which is kind of interesting. So bringing parents along to understand what this means, and where you might walk into a room and find that kids are doing very different things. It looks a little chaotic sometimes, and maybe it's not teacher-led, and so it looks different than what it was like when we went to school. And so it's hard sometimes to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And my colleague and I had this conversation about really making sure parents understand that what we're working toward is that expert learner, because they are worried about their kid getting behind, and if the teacher's not teaching them and standing up and delivering, how is this kid going to learn? My child will never learn if we don't, and so I reinforced and encouraged her to remember to have that conversation with parents, that it's about teaching the kids to be learners. That's really our job as educators, not to teach them math, science, and social studies. Those things are wonderful and they're important, but it's really about teaching kids that they are in charge of their learning. They're the learners. When they leave, they have to know how to do that learning, and they have to be excited about it, et cetera. So I think that's a real interesting challenge, and I'm excited to put in a little plug for our summit, because we have actually a session on that. So Katie Novak and Brian, what district is Katie out of? Can someone remind me?
She's Broughton Dunstable here in Massachusetts.
Okay. Yeah. And she's doing a session on how to bring parents along. So I'm really excited to hear how they're working through that issue. And it's a big one.
And that is almost, there were a number of founding principles that came together for UDL. One of them, architectural design, but another was technology. That and that is so different now than, it's changing. It's changing day by day, and those opportunities really are different than they used to be. And I see that as potentially being a way to remove some barriers, a way of being able to help students think about what it means to be expert learners, and that'll be different across different content areas. So an expert science learner is different than an expert English learner. And so that's where those different content and disciplines, we need those standards, and we need those disciplines to really help us define what that expert learning can be within those different disciplines. And there was a question that was asked, and Sue, it's funny, as you were talking, I thought, I wonder if I should bring this up. And Kathy did. So implementation with fidelity. So when you say that, what do you mean by that? And I think, and in a lot of ways, this is going to transition us very nicely as we start thinking about credentialing. So I don't have to go there yet if you don't want. If you just want to stay in with this idea of when you say that, what really are you thinking, and how would you define that fidelity for you and your conversations that you're having with parents and teachers?
Well, for example, I'll speak from a case example. Maybe that'll help make it more concrete. So this particular district that led me to say that has spent a lot of time looking at what is UDL. So they've moved through those stages of implementation. If any of you are familiar with Fixon's work, they talk about the different stages that any organization needs to go to when they're adopting new processes, new frameworks, new cultures of thinking, and so they have moved from that very beginning exploration stage and really looked at how UDL will work in all of the facets of their district. So for example, they look at how it works with their coaching system. They look at how UDL fits with things as basic as what the library looks like, the media center looks like, what their environments are. They talk about it in terms of their learning management system, and can we make sure all the kids have access to it. It's in their school improvement plan. I mean, they really looked at all the facets that affect kids' lives, and making sure that those align with the framework of universal design for learning and with each other, so that they're working together to develop really those expert learners. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
Kathy brings up a good point in the chat, and I think it's an important point to address. When you look at Fixon's work, it requires sort of an endpoint, something that you're trying to get to, and UDL is still how can I put this? UDL is still an evolving concept. It is a bit of a moving target because we keep learning more and more and more. And so do we have that endpoint that we're trying to get to? No. So as we're looking at some of this, we're also looking at going through those design cycles and looking at how do we get to an approach, a closer approximation of where we are going, and how do we continually redefine that target based upon what we learned from the previous cycle? That type of mentality is so very important at this stage of the game, because we are still learning. So it's an important piece of this puzzle. When I look at implementation, I always like to define things in a way that it's kind of easy to understand. When I look at implementation and talk about fidelity, I look at going into a school setting in which people can talk about universal design for learning, from administrators down, not down to, but administrators to the students. They're talking the language of UDL. They're talking the concepts. It's in the planning. It's in how the space is designed. It's in their purchasing decisions. It's in all of those places. That's good fidelity, but it's not. It's a good way. It's sort of that benchmark, as you put it in there. Fidelity is going to lead to those things, and I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah. It is very well said, and I do like the point that it is always evolving and changing. And this seems very counterintuitive. Like, shouldn't there be an endpoint? But we've even found, and there's I had it, and I just it'll come back to me. But our overall general IQ as a species increases about every 20 years. It just, and it's like, well, what could be going on? And really what's changing is the design of the environment and the way that we interact with it. That is even evolving and changing. So really nothing is fixed. It does seem like that's an illusion. And ironically, Fixin is the name of the implementation researcher who also does show that none of those phases are actually fixed, but that you explore and you prepare and then you try something and you integrate it, but then you go back and you might explore again, but then you might start to scale it and bring it, to other teachers or to parents, but then you might go back and explore and prepare a little more. So it really is, like you're saying, this moving target, but all along you really have some need that you're trying to improve. You really are trying to reach all of those learners, or you're trying to engage, or whatever that expert skill is, that need that you're going for. That's the piece that I think that you do continue to perhaps be able to see and measure. So I'm curious a little bit to know how, so the research of Fixin is one that you've mentioned. Are there others that have been impactful as you've looked to think about Fidelity and UDL that are worth mentioning at this point? Or just that come to mind. I shouldn't say that are worth mentioning right now, but just that come to mind. Many are worth mentioning.
I would love to draw people's attention. Sorry, I'm muted. I'd love to draw people's attention to, and we have a number of different groups that are working within the IRN. And one of the groups that is working very diligently on the research end is our research committee. And they have put together, and it is up on our website, sort of a beginning of the state of UDL research. And I'll drop this into the chat. And what this is basically, it's a conceptual diagram. There was an analysis done of a number of the different pieces of research on universal design for learning. And this diagram kind of gives some categories and some buckets, if you will, of where that research is. And if you go in there, we have actually a searchable database that you can actually access where those resources came from and so forth. This is a good place to go as we're starting to talk about implementation and so forth, to take a look at what do we know so far. It's a good place to start. This is an evolving concept, and so take a look at this resource. I think it's a good place to go.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Brian or Sue, anything else you want to add to that? That's fabulous.
I guess I agree with everyone in their comments about it being an evolving and a changing framework, that, coming back at it and looking at how things are evolving and that is actually part of the Fixin process. It's a change due, check action cycle, right? I mean, that's all good kind of implementation follows that kind of cycle. So I really appreciate those comments, and that's really what we're trying to do in the network, and you'll see a little bit about that next in I want to talk about our credentialing, actually.
I think that's a great lead in. Are you all right with that, Brian?
Oh, I'm good. I'm cool sitting here too.
Okay. So yeah, this is a big, I have to say, when I first thought about Credential and UDL, I just went, whoa, because as you all have mentioned, a lot of the learning that you do about the UDL that's happening comes from conversations that you have with teachers or with students, or that are happening just authentically from being able to, know, for example, that the LMS has been given access to all students, and, those kind of subtle things. So, so I'm very excited to talk a little bit with you a lot about the what, the how, the when, and the why. So, so what is this credentialing? How do you anticipate it might come about? When do you think this might be? And again, what is that ultimate, you know that we always go to the goal. What is the end point that we're really hoping for? And these can happen, you know, we can discuss these here at any point, so I'll just throw them all out there and let you jump in and begin sharing here.
That's a lot of questions. What, how, why, when? We have an extra like 5 hours to go into this, right?
I thought you were going to look at your watch and say it begins at 11:42 on September 22nd.
Oh, it's September 23rd. You're a day early.
September 23rd.
So when we're talking about UDL credentialing, and that has some interesting ways that people react when they hear that. They either get very excited about it or they become very apprehensive. And I think that's one of the things that we are tackling with this. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
Okay, it's not showing the slides that I put in.
Oh no. Let me see if I can pull that in for you here.
All right.
Yeah, you go ahead. Oh, I see exactly where it is. I'm going to go ahead and add that in.
Okay.
I'm not sure why that's not in. That's a great, there are quite a few. So yes, please continue the conversation.
Okay.
And we'll be loaded in momentarily.
First and foremost, UDL credentialing. Let's back up from that term for a second, and think about this. When we go through and we start asking the question, "What is UDL?" Think about the immense variety of responses we would get to that, and there are pros and cons with that when we are thinking about that. We also look at things and go, I'm not sure that any single person or single entity has the answer to that question either. And so through a lot of discussions, what we found was there's a need for people to understand. People want to understand what is this thing called UDL. They want a place to go and to begin to turn to and say, you know what, I want some more information about this. So discussions started, what would you, about a year and a half ago now? Thereabouts, about getting people together, again, that networking piece, to begin talking about what is UDL and how can we help people develop skills and knowledge regarding UDL. So we decided a systemic solution is needed. It needed to be field-based and stakeholder-driven. This couldn't be one organization, one individual, one think tank that sits there and says, we're going to define UDL for you and we're going to put this together completely. So we wanted to have a lot of input into all of this coming from various perspectives. So initially, there's kind of a cooperative organization that has developed that we refer to as the UDL Council. And the UDL Council consists of the UDL-IRN CAST and the National UDL Task Force, which is made up of a lot of different entities, going from teachers unions to publishers to school board associations, a lot of different entities all together. In looking at that, the discussion started coming around, what would a credential about UDL look like? We wanted to make sure that this was two important things. It was voluntary, it's something that people elected into, and it was verifiable. In other words, that if we were going to sit there and say there's a credential, that it has some meat and some meaning to it. So we started down this path of developing some ideas and getting a lot of input as to what this might be. We're very early in these discussions, but we've made some headway in some other areas. Let's kind of go to the next slide. Sorry.
Okay, and I'm apologizing that I might not, I'm going to just do a quick check here, a quick tech check, and see that I'm actually showing what needs to be shown here. So my apologies for Let's see if that looks better.
You want me to try it from my end?
Does that look better?
Yeah, Allison, you just might want to zoom out a little bit. It's a little zoomed into the screen. Now that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Brian, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Sue, Brian, did you want to add anything to that piece?
No, I think you're doing great. Kathy had a question about what the UDL Council was. I think you mentioned a little bit about it. If you want to elaborate a little on that.
So the UDL Council, again, is comprised of the UDL-IRN CAST and the National UDL Task Force. And the UDL Task Force brings on a number of other stakeholder groups as part of that. And basically the purpose of that was to take a look at some cooperative efforts between the groups to start moving down credentialing and what I'm going to talk about in a second, which is certification. The UDL Council is the initial group that's coming together and talking about these things from a variety of different perspectives, from industry perspectives, from school perspectives, teacher, parents, researchers, a lot of different individuals coming together on this. As we start looking, as we started to go down this path, we realized that there was a lot of different things that we had to think about. And one of the first needs that we had identified is there's a lot of information out there regarding universal design for learning. And that information is in a lot of different places, but there's not yet a place that kind of brings people together to share that information. And so one of the initial phases of this collaborative work has been what we're referring to as the UDL Credentialing and Certification Initiative. Phase one is about bringing together not only the membership within the council, but building what we're calling in quotes, the UDL collaborative platform, because we're still looking for a good name for it. Suggestions, please email them our way. But think about this as a platform, a way for people to bring information that they have designed or are in the process of designing and sharing that information on a platform that allows people to interact, allows people to house that content, allows people to create content and have sort of that central place. It's more than just a library. We want people to interact with this content. We want people, a collaboratory. I love
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
I love that. As we, this is the first phase of it, and it's really, again, it's really about bringing people together and sharing those resources, making those resources organized in a way that they're findable, allowing people to and develop new resources and share out those resources. And that's sort of the first phase of all of this is then bringing that all together.
Woo, that's a big first phase.
It is, and we're actually moving into an area in which we are asking people to generate content. That will be an area that that we are asking for help on. We're at kind of a small phase right now and asking for that. We'll be doing bigger ask as the platform develops. But if you move on to the next slide there. This kind of lays out sort of the plan of where things are going. I don't know how many people are familiar with the LEED certification from the United States Green Building Council, but the LEED certification is a voluntary certification and credentialing program that allows individuals who are interested in green building initiatives to gain skill and then be recognized for the skill and efforts that they are doing moving towards sustainable building and green initiatives. And we were fortunate enough to have a connection with the USGBC through one of our board members. And with that connection, we started learning a little bit more about the efforts that USGBC had gone through in establishing that. We sat there and said, you know, there's something to this. There's something to being able to provide ways for people to develop knowledge and skills about UDL and be recognized for their efforts in building UDL. And so we're going through this pathway where we're building this online platform. First phase is about getting content in there, sharing, building a community, building network. As we move in, we'll eventually be moving down more of a credentialing phase. Difference between credentialing and certification. Credentialing is about what people know. Micro-credentialing is becoming more and more of an accepted method of professional development, and this is where we're starting with this, is building short little courses. So say, for example, and it's not only us, we're working with a variety of partners, and we're going to be opening up this platform so that many people can build courses around all of this. But think about if I was a teacher just starting out and I just wanted to figure out what is UDL. I can go in and look at a catalog of learning experiences that not only give that understanding of UDL, but are designed in reflecting the principles of UDL, and start building my own knowledge and skills and earn micro-credentials through that process that I can then show I have a certain degree of understanding about universal design for learning. That's credentialing. Certification is down the road a while, and it's showing it's a way to recognize the efforts that buildings and that so schools or industry folks or curriculum designers or other areas are doing to take those tenets of UDL and put them into action. That's down the way. This is sort of the overall vision, and groups like the UDL Council are meeting and talking and moving that vision forward.
Brian, am I going to have to take a test on UDL?
Goodness, I hope not. But in order to get a micro-credential, in order to be successful at the end of that, there is something that you may need to do in order to apply what you learned. But in good UDL, we're probably going to have a lot of different options as to how to do that.
And the whole idea of the volunteer, you know, you made that very explicit up front. And sometimes, you know, we run the risk in education of being voluntold that you're going to be doing something. But I really, you know, appreciate the effort to say, no, this is something that you're interested in building for your own self and for your own practice. The way that we do, you know, the way that we take on other interests to again, continue lifelong learning, expert learning of our own. This does seem to, if we kind of tie back to some of the conversation that we had earlier on about what that means to build expert learning, it does seem like we're, you know, the efforts of this ultimately are to build this more expert collaborative network that is implementing and is researching and is really able to elevate the level of what we're seeing for student outcomes ultimately. You know, again, to just tie back to that is where we're going for. We do want to reach all learners and have them really feel success, have that emotion piece there, be able to feel like they know how to gain information, how to show what they know, and be purposeful in that way. So I did just have to throw out that little question because I know that that's often, you hear the word credential or certificate and you think, oh no, you know, I imagine those big thick books and I'm going to have to study it. So thank you for putting me at a little bit more ease there. Brian or Sue, do you have anything you want to add? This is really detailed. This is a lot of information that's really important.
I'm happy to let Brian Wojcik take this on. This is his baby, so we're excited about it. You know, we're really thinking that this is a great way to recognize. I know George Van Horn is on tonight. So districts like Georgia's, where they're really, I'm going to use it again, implementing with Fidelity, it's a chance for them to wear that badge and to be proud of it and to share their successes. He added in the chat today that all the subgroups in his school in the last year showed significant improvements in their state assessments. So it's a chance for them to really celebrate the work they're doing and to feel strongly, to get recognized for it.
No, I think it is a great opportunity, and that's the positive way of looking at it, looking what we have as opposed to looking at it from the deficit model of what we don't have. And again, I go back to Brian Dean early on. We talked a little bit about how what has been exciting for learners about UDL is that we all have these brains and we have these networks. So if we continue to approach it with that positive mindset of what is there, then some of the logistics of or even just a question that a thought of. So what is good UDL? Would those kind of questions be answered? And would there be places, one of the things we always want to do is see more examples. So as you envision this content being delivered, would there be a vetting process for it, or would anyone really be able to share? I mean, we have folks from all over the world on this conversation right now. So would they be able to contribute into those that content that you're talking about?
So when talking about the content, and I want to separate, we have content that will be shared up on the platform, and this is content and that has been developed and regarding universal design for learning that is going to be shared out with a larger mass. And there are some sort of minimum standards that we're in the process of designing, and that allows it to go from not being published to published. We want to make sure that and that it has accessibility. It has certain pieces in there. There's not a lot of regulation on that content, and we're going back to allowing that content to be viewed by the larger. We got a lot of questions regarding vetting. This is a sticky widget. Okay. Let me be clear. On the platform side, with regard to the resources, yes, we want quality content. That content is going to be developed in a couple different ways. It's going to be developed by partnering with folks and working with them to develop quality content. But anybody can develop that and contribute content to the platform. We want the community to come in and do some of the vetting and reviewing of that content and make some determinations. That's part of this, is bringing it back out to the network, because as people have said in the chat, there's been questions about what is good and what is good in UDL. These are targets that are still moving, so we have to be able to bring that back to a larger audience and talk about those types of things. When we start moving down content for credentialing, that's down the road a little bit, because there are some things that we are going to have to come to some degree of consensus as to what are those initial steps or those initial targets that we are trying to get at, because we have to be able to design around those targets. And that piece has yet to be fully articulated and fully realized. And it's going to take a lot of conversation, and it's going to take a lot of efforts from a lot of different aspects of the overall network in order to get there.
And I again want to just go back to that. Really is where we'll pull in the research, we'll pull in the implementation, we'll pull in the network, and that really can be the power of that network that you're creating. In the interest of time, I'm going to push us just a little bit further to this slide. Brian, can you debrief a little?
Sure. So if we think about this online platform, and as we think about this online platform, we're starting with curated content. We're starting with gathering content that exists. Then we want to make sure that with that curated content, we have a networking and sharing piece where we're engaging the larger community in looking at that content interacting, providing feedback, developing that content even further, and then eventually moving into micro-credentials. And these are small little niche credentials that focus on small skills. Things like, how could I potentially use technology to support students in a middle school that have difficulty with accessing print in typical ways? Or it could be something as simple of, not simple, but how can I change my classroom design to reflect the tenets of universal design for learning, and start building those smaller skills as we go through.
It seems like, again, that's almost, you're talking about, again, that having that need for change. If everything's working fine and learners are learning to a high expert level that you hope, then, things are going well. But as soon as you start having something, even one student not accessing, or an environment that maybe doesn't feel that way, that gives you that need for change. And that's where then you might go and seek out some content to really help you address that need for change. And UDL can be that framework to really help you troubleshoot. And then you're building this network, and you're sharing, and by the way, along the way, you're able to get some credentialing out of it, just to build that effort that you're putting into it, which can be really, it can be very, it's big what you're taking on, and we recognize, in the comments that are coming out, that certainly an hour isn't enough to talk about it. So if we could so there is a fabulous opportunity to talk about this more coming up this spring. Actually, it's really soon. March 30th to 31st is the UDL-IRN Summit. It's in a really fun place. Baltimore was fun last year, but this is in Orlando, Florida. So do any of you want to talk about this here? Because this is a great opportunity to talk about these issues and more, and to network.
I'll start us out, Allison, on this conversation, but Brian, I hope you jump in too. But I do want to reiterate exactly what you said, that was a great segue, that if you're passionate about this topic, whether it's credentialing or the definition of UDL or what does it look like, come join us at the summit. This is the perfect place to have those conversations. It's an intimate group of people who really have a strong belief in this is the thing we need to be doing. And so it's a great time to come, ask questions, have conversations, have discourse, argue, challenge. That's what we're all about. So if you aren't registered, go ahead and get yourself registered. You can go to udl-irn.org. It is 3 days of wonderful learning. Our tagline is, where UDL leaders come to learn. And it really is this opportunity for people who are knee deep in it, and for novices, people who are just getting started, to come and learn. So if you want to take us to the next slide, I'm going to dig in just a little deeper.
Ooh.
Just to let you know what's happening at the summit, we have 2 wonderful design labs. Brian, do you want to tee it off to you to talk about those briefly?
Yeah, so design labs are something that we've started to institute, and it's the idea of bringing a salon and design thinking and space and unconferences and maker sessions all together, and having a beautiful baby with UDL. And so it's this place where we can we have spaces for having conversations just like this, and bringing individuals in and having them sit down, and one of the beautiful things about UDL is that it's at its core and at its very essence, it's a grassroots, right? So you can sit and have conversations at the summit with David Rose, or Katie Novak, or Brian Wojak, or just a myriad of people, and it's just conversation, and then it leads to action because everybody's pretty passionate. And then the design lab's a great place also to bring maybe a problem of practice that you have, or a question or an inquiry of practice that you have, and talk with some other people that have maybe gone through it. It's a great place to meet up. It's we get a little wild and crazy in there. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there were a lot of good games, and if you even just look at the website, there are pictures of people just looking like they're doing very interesting things. They are not just sitting. It is quite active.
Absolutely. And then in addition to that, we've got 12 interactive networking sessions. So they're our take on a poster session, a little more interactive, a lot more fun. We're pairing that this year with happy hours, so I don't know how much more fun you can get than that. We also offer 7 pre-conference sessions, again, starting with the UDL novice, all the way up to folks who are doing UDL professional development. And what does that look like? And so many of the people who are talking tonight will be conducting those. So Brian Dean, Allison, Mindy, who's hosting us on the chat, is conducting one of those. So if you're looking to dig deep in a topic, spend an afternoon or all day on a particular portion of UDL, check out those pre-conferences. We also have 7 UDL talks. Those are 18 minutes of just powerhouse, just really great ideas about universal design for learning and its impact on kids and thinking and the brain and all kinds of things. 27 breakout sessions. Again, Brian named some of the folks who we're going to have there, but they are UDL's top list of thinkers, researchers, implementers, presenters. So far, we have 367 awesome Summit peeps registered and counting. And of course, we have the one and only David Rose closing us out, as he does every year. So that was a quick drive-by of the summit, and we hope that you'll come out and join us and join in the conversation. One participant said, "This is the most fun I've ever had at a conference. I didn't want it to end," and it really, really is. You never know what's going to happen. All kinds of fun and games, and we encourage you to come and see us.
Definitely do. And please bring your questions. We don't have time for them right now. There is a hashtag UDL chat right now at 9 p.m., which you can do. And bring these questions and problems to the summit. It is different than the UDL for Social Justice Conference that's going on in the summer. Someone asked about that. And there's also going to be a fall workshop that's at BCSC this year. Opportunities to research with CAST and professional publishing and AIM, which again are separate, but they're all UDL. They are all connected. We all have this mission and this drive to really try to improve learning outcomes for everyone. I really want to thank our captioner, Sheila, tonight, and I want to thank you all for sticking with us through this. I know it's very late for some of you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Brian, Sue, Brian Dean, I really appreciate you really trying to share a lot of the thinking that's going on with the IRN. You've introduced us, and you've also let us dive straight into some of the really tough problems that you're really thinking deeply about. So thank you so much. And we'll have to put a little ... for some of those, open up the drawers and see what else is in the IRN. So come to the summit in the end of March, or look for us, follow us on Twitter if you can't attend live.
And don't forget, UDL chat starts a minute ago. You got to be there. Yeah, that's the other outlet. I got to do the shameless plug, folks. UDL chat.
There is UDL chat, hashtag UDL chat. It is fun.
Hashtag UDL chat.
And Allison, I just want to thank you for inviting us tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to all the many people you reach out to. So we're excited to grow our little networking family.
We're thrilled to have you, and it's all you all who participated tonight and who are watching the recording who are going to help us bring this to life. So it is that belief system in our heart to learning has no limits. So you all have a great evening. And
one more little thing.
Yes, absolutely.
That, if you are interested in becoming more actively involved in UDL-IRN, there's a place on our website to put your name and email address, and someone will contact you. We would love to have you be part of our group. UDL-IRN.org.
There it is, UDL-IRN.org. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Brian, Sue, Brian, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Allison.
Allie and Mindy, thank you for all the back channel help.